This is awkward. All right, can everybody hear me? Good, good. All right, so sucks to be you, I'm sorry. All right, so I am Tim Jensen, Senior Penetration Tester, AppSec Consulting. I have a CISSP, yay. All three of us. All right, so the disclaimer I have to make here. I'm not doing this on part of my employer. None of the screenshots are from my customers' environments, and no customer engagement data is present in my presentation. Everything has to have been found multiple times. I find that useful both for not getting sued, as well as for making it actually relevant for you guys. So about me, I've been in security and computing all my life, literally since I was able to touch the keyboard. I've been learning programming and stuff. Been a blast. Started doing 2600 in 1998 as soon as my mom would let me. All those creepy people, I can't believe she did. Worked as a developer, system administrator before entering security. Since security, I've worked in defense, offense, development, you name it, I've done it. All right, so what I'm talking about today is some of the problems in penetration testing. So I'm a senior penetration tester. Some of the things that I've had to do in my role is review other people's reports. So my underlings, coworkers, as well as when I go on site, the first thing that customers usually give me is a pile of old pen test reports, sometimes for years, and they're yelling about it going, all that I'm getting back is a Nessus scan. Has anybody ever heard that or done that or yelled about it? All right, so we just got handed a Nessus report, or it's just basically a Nessus report. Automated tools like Nessus is great and all. Burp Suite Pro has gotten really good at finding things, but you need to look at some stuff manually. Unfortunately, a lot of times when I see people complaining that they're just getting a Nessus report, they are literally just getting a Nessus report, which really depresses me. Because when you go and do the assessment, you find all sorts of stuff that if they had looked with their eyes, they would have caught it. And you can obviously tell them nobody did, and it's really depressing to me. On the other hand, sometimes when you get something that looks like a Nessus report, you don't have any vulnerabilities. That sometimes happens, but I think that's happened once in the last 3 years for me, so pretty rare. So I am very graphic friendly, and I'm actually hoping at the end of this to have extra time because I want to do some extra Q&A and hear what kind of problems people have been having, both seeing as well as if you're on the defensive side or development or anything else, any questions that you want to ask a pen tester and not get charged a ton of money for. We're not cheap. All right, so all the screenshots in my presentation except one come from things that I've randomly seen around the internet in the last 6 months or so. And it's stuff that I see in the field all the time, and I'm just using this to give us a nice big list of things to look at. So one of the first things that I would look at in an application, it's still depressingly common, is any sort of a numerical string. If you guys are all going, this is going to be a really basic talk, it gets better. Not much better, because sadly, this is the kind of crap I have to deal with all the time, because we're still not getting it. When I have to do a report with 50 findings on it that are 50 basic findings, it's hard to spend the time to actually do anything better. That's another thing for you developers. Fix the small stuff and we can actually help you with the big stuff. But anytime I see something like an action create and a group ID, what's the first thing you're going to do, right? Is if it ends at 50, bring it down to 49 and see what happens. In the case with this app, it actually doesn't break, but this app is so poorly made that it probably could. But this is create users, so if that did work, you can increment down and start creating users in different organizations, because that says group ID there for nobody that can read it. So I've seen that a lot, where you can start creating accounts across a bunch of different groups. Banks, especially credit unions, do that a lot, where one software will run like 1,000 credit unions, and you can start just incrementing through all the credit unions and creating users or making transactions. It's insane. And it seems to be very common in just that market for some reason. All right, so next little step on that app. So we have a group ID again, we have an action view. What we're doing here is reviewing a user. You can see all the things that I've had to black out. That's always a good sign for me. But what I love here is that the password was in plain text, and every user in the organization can see each other's passwords. That's great. And that there's no HTTPS. I've worked with, without naming names, I've worked with several very large applications this year that still isn't using HTTPS across the entire app. And it's sensitive data. I don't understand. I really don't. Null passwords. Does anybody here actually check for null passwords if you're testing something? One. Great. Two. Sorry. Two. All right. Null passwords is something that I keep getting on my guys for, or used to. My new company is awesome and not dumb. The old one wasn't dumb, but sometimes things get missed. But null passwords is one of those things that a lot of people don't think of. In this case, we have an authentication box. I just grabbed Outlook. They're not vulnerable to this. But you put in a username and a password. The backend code looks like this because somebody followed keep it simple stupid. You know, you go and you say, here's the user ID. I want to return the password from the database. If the password equals the return password from the database, we do the login. Otherwise, we throw an invalid error. Well, the thing that security has been pushing for the last couple of years now is to stop allowing users to be able to fully create their accounts, and they go through the authentication, and then it sends them an email, and then they click the email, and it sends them back to enter the password. What's happening is that the applications a lot of times are creating the accounts before the email is sent, which means that if you send a null password and they've kept their authentication box simple, you can break into the account. So if you can enumerate a bunch of the user IDs, run through the blank passwords or null passwords, I'm finding a lot of apps that are vulnerable to this, and I'm cracking 40% of the accounts ridiculously simple. If they're vulnerable, it's scary. And usually there'll be some sort of provisioning for administrators inside where they'll provision like 10 admins, only 6 of them will ever fill it out. That means that an admin is there, now you've just taken over the whole app. I should also say I work a lot in the financial district, so if I'm seeing this stuff, that should be scaring you already. Yeah. Sensitive data handling. This one I've been hitting out on a lot this year, and I actually just hit out on one that I haven't notified them yet, so I can't talk about it, but it's very similar to some of these in a major financial institution. So this is basic stuff, right? You have an autocomplete box that's storing credit card numbers. That would be bad. That's one problem. This came from Hotwire earlier this year. They did fix it. But this has actually been vulnerable for several years. It's been bugging me. And I finally spent an entire day tracking these guys down and figuring out how to talk to them. And it took me literally 8 hours to do it. It was insane. But credit card number's there. You see that it's also asking for the CVV number when you're doing your payments. This is the part that got me to finally talk to them. So you can kind of see there that's bad, right? You get some chuckles. So credit card number and CVV, do you want to remember this? They love for you to hit that because then it's automatically stored in the system so people don't have to keep typing their credit cards. They're actually promoting it in the use of their website, or they used to be. That got stripped now. But obviously it's easy to go in, pull up the passwords, and now you've got your credit card number and your password, and we can see that it was for hotwire.com. They fixed that very quickly. Unfortunately, it kind of sounded like it was a known issue at the time, and they couldn't get any internal traction until somebody complained about it. So something I always encourage, even though you can probably get in trouble for it. I've gotten in some hot water a few times trying to disclose things, but if you want it fixed and it's something you actually use, if you disclose it, somebody will fix it because you're a security expert, or at least you can bill yourself to be. So, public Wi-Fi. This is something I ran into. I was giving a talk in Oregon. I was sitting at this nice, small little security conference watching the public Wi-Fi. And this is how easy sometimes it can be to find stuff. Start Kismet, open the PCAP and Wireshark, and just throw your filters in to watch TCP and UDP. If you're not watching frame packets go by, never connect to the network. Just watch the beacons basically going across. It's really fun to watch that sometimes because you actually find more stuff sometimes than if you're connected to the network, which I find interesting. I do both. I usually have 2 separate VMs connected with different hardware watching both, and I do find a ton out of the beacons. So here's what I found this time. The main reason I'm talking about this is because it's Amazon.com. They have a very large security team, right? If anybody's ever looked at jobs there, they have a large security team. They have very good practices, and this shows that you can still miss stuff. Mainly this shows when you're doing an assessment, if you keep seeing the HTTPS flag on every page, Actually, in Burp Suite, there's a little checkbox of plain text versus HTTPS. You can select it and say only show me plain text ones. I always choose that at the end of the engagement to make sure I didn't miss anything in the millions of transactions I've done in a week. Because there's 2 transactions here in the entire Amazon surfing. This guy was on it for 45 minutes. And here we've got 2 weird transactions that happened, and I'm just showing one of them. But it's plain text, connecting again, HTTP, and there's the session ID, which I had to redact, but it did allow you in, and it expires in 2036. So, I mean, I've got it copied down, and I can still get into the account. Like, it was in Oregon, I tried it, you can get into the account. I'm going to keep being able to get into the account, because even when they hit the logout button, it doesn't crash the session server side. These are problems. Forceful browsing, this is one of my favorite things to do. This is where I find a lot of findings that other people miss. So this is common when you haven't, and I'm probably talking to the crowd here, but missing. But you have an application, it has a standard user, a power user, and an admin user, right? And you go through and you find every single website or web page page in there that each user type can get to. So you start with admin, and then you go down to super user and say, super user shouldn't have access to these 3, let me go check if it does. User doesn't have access to all this, check if it does. That's common. That finds a lot of stuff. Especially if the null password works. They're usually bad enough programmers that works, just saying. But something else that I've been doing for many years, this seems very trivial to me. I found out a lot of people aren't doing it. Scrape directory data from your lab environments, your customers, make sure that it can't get tracked back to them. Don't leave in, Acme Corp in the URLs and then go slam the next customer with it because you've just exposed your customer's data. Or even just surfing out the web and doing some Google hacking. You can find these directory structures, go use that for forceful browsing. If you know what's on the server, you're much more likely to find stuff. An example of that is SharePoint. Does anybody here have companies that are running SharePoint? I see a gun to the head, thank you. All right, I'm loving it. So a lot of people have SharePoint, right? This is going to almost always work. If you haven't heard of this one before or seen it, it's almost for sure that it's going to work. So what we have here is you need some setup. You need to be able to log into the account, or any account. So create a user, have a user, whatever. But basically you're going to a URL /layouts _ aclinv.aspx, and it brings up a site setting page like this. I just found one on the internet that allowed me to sign in, and you can go to it. So there's the grant permissions. I'm going to stop. You can't actually create users through this, but what you can do is this little box down here is my favorite. And what you have here is a select people and groups. For this group, they were using local authentication, so it doesn't show anything. Well, it did a few, but I edited that. But what happens, what I love, is when they're domain joined, because most of them are, and you get the entire Active Directory list for the domain joined server. If I can have every email address in the company and everybody federated, that's funny. I originally found this in an incredibly sensitive customer. Since then, I've been finding it over and over again. 1 in 20 emails sent out for a spear phishing campaign is likely to succeed. I've usually been at about 1 in 15 when I'm doing the lamest spear phishing ever. And I still get good numbers. So if you can pull up 500, you're going to win. It's just a guarantee. So again, the required conditions on this, running SharePoint. I haven't found a version of SharePoint it hasn't worked with yet. Since they put in the feature in SharePoint 2000, it's there. I've been checking new stuff, old stuff, everything in between. The site has to be accessible to the hacker. Attacker has to be able to create a user account, and the admin hasn't locked on the page yet, which is very unlikely because nobody's talking about this. So the big thing is, can they create a user account? Well, does anybody know how many people are using SharePoint for their main web application, or their main web page? It's kind of insane. It'd be great if somebody made a database of all of them. So here's the top SharePoint sites made by a marketing group that shows you every Fortune 500 company with the public-facing websites that are vulnerable, that they're using. I'd say out of the 300 or so, I've looked at some of them. I'd say about 1 in 10 is vulnerable to this. for the top Fortune 500s. These are going to be the guys that actually know what they're doing, and they're still vulnerable to it. And mainly the only reason that the other ones aren't vulnerable is you can't create a user account. But a lot of these you can create a user account and log into the page, you go to the URL, and now you can take all the information out of their Active Directory. Kind of easy, kind of sad. All right. JSON, AJAX, and other information disclosures. Good pen tester has to look at every request and response, right, during a web app assessment. So information I've seen disclosed through API calls, internal IDs, database type, usernames, passwords, and my personal favorite, an entire database table. They'd query and say, here's the username and password, send back the whole database table, and I'm going to parse it client side. Like, I don't get it, and it was the authentication table. Whoops. Yeah, it takes a second to get that to break in. All right, so this is the only screenshot that I didn't get myself because my customers obviously aren't going to let me start sending their data around. So I ended up stealing this one off the internet. But all that you're looking for here is any type of a dump like that. So I believe this was a JSON. But it dumps a bunch of info back. This guy had to edit his quite a bit. Anywhere that these spaces are, for some reason the screen's showing blue and it's supposed to be black. So you can actually see this, I'm sorry. But there's IDs, there's user IDs, there's what the parent accounts are. You see this all the time, over and over and over again. It's becoming more of a problem. More people are moving to JSON apps that entirely everything runs transactionally through JSON. Mainly because, and I actually talked to a developer recently that was doing that, they found that the pen testers don't know what to do with it because their tools all flag out saying that everything, you send something to it and it says, hey, cross-site scripting is everywhere in the application, and they just rule it out because they don't know how to interpret the results. So they're catching the guys that don't know what they're doing and trying to say that that's a more secure application when nobody's actually looking at the piles of data that it's sending back to you. Now, if you're competent, you probably know that already, but there's a lot that aren't. Another thing I've been seeing, especially this year for some reason, multi-step authentication failures. I know that they've always been around. People seem to be tightening up their authentication a bit. So what I'm talking about here is you have a page, right? Username, password, whatever. I actually had to doctor this because I notified them of it. They had it fixed within 3 days or less. I checked 3 days later and it was fixed. But you give it an invalid email address, it pops that up. You give it a valid email address and an invalid password, and it pops that up. If you give it a valid email address and password, it asks you for the CAPTCHA. What's the purpose of the CAPTCHA at that point if you can go and enumerate all the accounts, break the passwords, and now you've got a list sitting out there of accounts that you have to go manually authenticate to. So you can do all the information disclosure. So basically, the CAPTCHA is protecting against a bot, but it's only protecting against a bot that nobody's watching. The problem is, how do you get a tool to actually follow that? Because it's multi-step and you have to actually think a little bit, the tools aren't catching it automatically. You have to actually look at it a little bit and apply your brain. There's ways to make the tools do it, so you can make Burp Suite follow all that, but by default, a lot of people are missing this stuff. The one that I just recently did that had been vulnerable for at least 5 years, they got pen tested twice a year and it got missed everywhere. I really want to start giving talks on more interesting topics, I really do, but I keep wading through all of the bull and I'm getting tired of it, so I think next time I'm just going to start saying, you got 15 findings that you should have caught yourself, go look them up, but that's how you not get hired back. So, all right, so forgot password disclosures. These should not be anything new. Forgot password should always email somebody on file. To change the password, you should not email the old password. You get that a lot. I forgot to put in here that the link should expire so that they can't just change the password back if they've broken into your email too. Old password should not be displayed to the user. I'm still seeing that a lot. And secret questions are my least favorite thing in the world to see because what's your favorite color? I mean, what is there, 12 options to this? If you really want to go and pull down Crayola's site, you can get all of theirs, but you're probably down to 6, right? Red, blue, green, black, orange, whatever. Periwinkle, there we go. That would be at least a better one. But you're not trying to break every account, you're just trying to break a percentage, right, to get in. So favorite color is a great one. City you were born in. I'm from North Dakota. How many cities can you be born in, right? More importantly, even if it's California or something that has more cities, or New York or whatever, every state has lists that you can go pull down of every city in the state. You can go pull these from all 50 states. It took me 5 minutes the one time that I had to do it. And that was just because I think it was Kansas. It takes a while to find. Make it into a giant list, and now you've got, you know, crackability. Mother's maiden names, a great thing. Social Security Department actually gives out lists of every surname in America, every first name in America. All these great lists out there. I didn't know that until I started digging around for something completely unrelated and found this treasure trove of great information that you can go use to brute force these questions. This one really depresses me because I don't think anybody should not find this stuff. File shares. Things can be found in open file shares in the company. Now there's two types of open file shares I'm talking about. The one is completely anonymous with read or write access, usually both, or that you have a low-level account like a call center rep that for some reason has access to massive data stores that are sitting out there because they just gave it to any authenticated domain user. I always check both on an internal assessment. Things that I found, Mike is rubbing his eyes. Database dumps containing entire databases in varying formats. Logs containing PHI, PII, usernames, passwords, etc. Logs are some of my favorite things in the world, especially web logs, because internal applications almost are always sending usernames, passwords, or something in the clear in the parameters of the URL. I love those. Active Directory application install repositories with anonymous read-write. Last year I did a lot of internal assessments. I must have found this at 8 out of 10. I mean, it was insane how many people, because they want their IT to be able to just go and drag and drop, right? And you don't want to actually add your IT tech support guys, you know, to the share. So just give it to every domain user, or to anybody, which I found more often than not. Hard disk backups, I find a ton. 5 minutes already? Jeez. I was trying to have a lot of extra time. I'm sorry, guys. All right, so shutting up. Full C drives with anonymous read-write. Find that a lot. You can actually find that on Shodan a lot. If you don't use Shodan, I love it. Accounting data, accounting data, accounting data. If you want to find a lot of accounting data and credit cards and everything else, go on Shodan, because not only are the file shares open inside the company, with Shodan you can find them outside the company. And I'd say about 1 in 3 has some sort of accounting data on it when you start looking through the file shares that are open. So rob away. I'm not advocating robbing, but it goes back to that disclaimer, my employer is not me. All right, so cookies. Commonly contain sensitive data, usernames, passwords, and if the user is an admin, I see that one a ton, and just changing that in the cookie oftentimes gets you admin. Verify cookies long enough to be safe. I have been finding a ton that have these nice, giant, long-looking cookies. If you go and expire 50 sessions and bring them up and actually look at them in a list, the first, like, N number, most of it is static, and it's just changing the last like 5, 6, 7 bits. I'm seeing that a lot. I've also been seeing it where it rotates like 4 prefixes per cookie, and then it starts showing the end, or it starts changing the ends. We only have 4 prefixes to guess, so you can start cracking these cookies a little better. Third parties, this has been my year for third-party disclosures. Verify what data is being sent to third parties. Google Analytics, I've had usernames, passwords, all sorts of fun stuff being sent to that. The marketing teams are the ones running that. I'm not talking about ads itself, where your marketing teams for your companies are setting it up to get different trends. I've seen credit cards stored, addresses, order information sent to both Google Analytics and ad aggregators. Trusted partners, I've been seeing a lot of weird stuff being sent to this year. Can't talk about it, but if you start looking, you're going to see what I'm talking about at some major sites. And it's actually all over the internet because they're trusted third-party partners for a lot of people. Data that I've seen sent, yeah, whatever. Users' cookies I'm actually seeing sent now lately. I wasn't going to bring that one up until I've seen it now like 3 or 4 times on the internet myself, where the third party is receiving, it's not the entire cookie as it is, but it's in like 10 parameters broken apart, and if you actually look at it, and it's usually base 64 encoded, you decode this and look at it, and you've got the entire user session cookie now sent to some random party And you got to start wondering, why do they need access as the user to impersonate them? Because it's the only reason that they would have it. Connect to every port. Again, this should be basic. If you don't know what it's doing, go and look at it. Hit it with Telnet, hit it with SSH, see what happens. Jenkins has an SSH API console, if anybody knows about it. A lot of people don't. You try Google searching this, you're not going to find much on it at all. You access it by going to something like that. The port changes randomly, so you find a random port. And it's SSH. I try to log into Jenkins every time. You attach onto the SSH command get list. There's no authentication by default. On a lot of them, they actually fixed it now, but the old ones, there's no authentication. It dumps you a list of everything, including that you can just shut the server down. But you can start manipulating code and all sorts of stuff depending on how they've set permissions in each version. Another one, I telnetted to a port, got nothing, but the port stayed open. I typed help, and it gave me a command prompt. That was a major application as well. They fixed that. All right, so I just rushed through the last little bit, and I'm already over time. Thanks, you've been a great audience.